At 88 years old, Colonel James "Jim" Herrigan thought he'd seen it all: combat skies, battlefield rescues, and the quiet struggles of aging. But nothing prepared him for the moment he was told, flatly and without apology, that his confirmed seat on Flight 305 no longer existed. The gate agent barely looked up as she handed him a flimsy slip of paper that read "Standby." Jim blinked, confused. "This ticket was purchased 6 months ago," he said quietly, holding out the printed confirmation. "I'm on my way to my granddaughter's graduation from the Air Force Academy." The agent shrugged, citing a last-minute aircraft change and overbooking policy. To her, he was just another traveler caught in the shuffle. Not a Medal of Honor recipient, not a decorated Air Force colonel who had once landed a crippled bomber to save his crew. Jim kept his voice calm, though his hands trembled slightly, not with age, but with the sting of quiet disrespect. He presented his DoD identification card, the one issued only to recipients of the nation's highest military honor. Still, the agent showed no sign of recognition, no concern for his destination or past. "It's out of my hands," she said. "Next in line, please." Jim stepped aside, the standby slip crumpling softly in his hand. Through the terminal window, he could already see the aircraft that was supposed to carry him to Colorado Springs. A simple flight, a treasured moment, denied by a system that didn't recognize honor, only boarding codes. He found a seat near the glass, heart heavy, not with anger, but quiet disbelief. He had faced enemy fire with more dignity than what he now encountered from a desk. Colonel James "Jim" Herrigan stood silently at gate B7, clutching the small slip of paper that now read "Standby" in block letters. His original boarding pass, seat 12A, purchased 6 months earlier, was nowhere to be found. It had been replaced by a system decision, an automatic reassignment, triggered by a smaller aircraft in the impersonal calculations of airline software. He remained calm on the outside, but inside, a heavy wave of disbelief and quiet humiliation washed over him. This wasn't just any trip. He was on his way to pin lieutenant bars on the shoulders of his granddaughter, Emily, who would soon graduate from the Air Force Academy. A moment generations in the making was now slipping away, not due to weather, not due to mechanical failure, but because a gate agent refused to see the man standing in front of her. He stepped forward again, gently clearing his throat. "Ma'am, my name is Colonel James Herrigan. I'm traveling to a graduation at the Academy. This ticket was bought months ago. Seat 12A was confirmed. I even paid for it out of pocket." Susan, the gate agent, barely looked up from her keyboard. "Yes, sir, you've said that. But as I explained, the system automatically reassigns based on class of fare and check-in sequence. The flight's full. You're on standby now." Jim reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn Department of Defense ID card. "I rarely use this, but I am a Medal of Honor recipient. This is an official Air Force-related family event. Surely there's a way to make an exception." She glanced at the card without emotion. "I understand, sir," she said, her tone clipped, "but we have several high-priority passengers. Our system doesn't make distinctions for past military honors. It's based strictly on algorithmic input and priority boarding codes." He inhaled slowly. "Ma'am, with all respect, this isn't just some nostalgic visit. My granddaughter's graduating today, following in my footsteps. She worked her whole life to get there, and I gave mine to ensure she had that chance." Susan tapped at her keyboard again, as if his words were an annoying pop-up she needed to close. "The next flight with open seats is tomorrow morning. You can check in for that one at the counter." Tomorrow morning. The words fell like a hammer. The ceremony would be over. The pinning, the moment where a grandfather could pass the torch to the next generation, would happen without him. Jim's voice tightened, just barely. "There has to be someone I can speak to. A manager. Someone who can understand what this moment means." "I'm the lead agent on duty," Susan replied flatly, "and I've already explained the situation. Now please, if you're not boarding, step aside so we can process the remaining passengers." A few other travelers looked up, sensing the awkward tension. Ben, the younger agent at the second computer, shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. He looked at Jim as if he wanted to help, but he didn't have the authority or courage to challenge Susan's rigid position. Feeling the sting of dismissal, Jim stepped away from the counter and walked slowly toward a row of empty seats near the large terminal window. Through the glass, he could see the aircraft he was meant to be on, Flight 305 to Colorado Springs, boarding steadily, the jet bridge still attached. He sank down into the seat, the standby slip still crumpled in his hand, and stared out at the plane. His military training told him to stay calm, to adapt, to endure. But right now, he didn't feel like a warrior. He felt invisible. His thoughts drifted to his granddaughter, standing tall in uniform, probably scanning the audience later that day, hoping to find his face. He had promised her he'd be there. That promise now hung in the air like vapor, slowly fading. He opened his wallet again, not to look at his ID, but at something tucked behind it. A small laminated card given to him years ago by a Pentagon official after a travel mix-up on semi-official business. It was a direct line to the Department of Defense's Distinguished Visitor Protocol Liaison. For situations where dignity must be preserved, the officer had said. He had never used it, never thought he would. But now, as he looked once more at the indifferent gate and the departing flight, Jim realized this was not just about a missed seat. This was about respect, and someone needed to remember what that meant. Jim stared at the small laminated card in his hand, its edges worn soft from years inside his wallet, its text still crisp. Department of Defense, Distinguished Visitor Protocol Office, 24/7 liaison line. He had been given the number nearly 2 decades ago by a Pentagon official after a complicated military travel delay. "Colonel," the officer had said at the time, "this isn't for upgrades or luxuries. It's for moments where dignity and protocol must be preserved. Use it only when it matters." This moment mattered. With hands that trembled less from age and more from quiet resolve, Jim pulled out his phone and dialed the number. The call was answered before the first full ring finished. "Protocol Liaison, Duty Officer Kent speaking," came a crisp, professional voice. "This is Colonel James Herrigan, United States Air Force, retired, Medal of Honor recipient. I've been bumped to standby on Flight 305, Alliance Air, despite holding a confirmed ticket for 6 months. I'm trying to attend my granddaughter's graduation at the Air Force Academy. It's happening today." Silence, except for the sound of fast typing. "Understood, sir," Kent replied. "Please confirm your current gate and terminal." "Gate B7, North Terminal, Alliance Air. Colonel, do not leave the gate area. This is being escalated immediately to flag officer level within the Department of Defense and to the FAA. You will either be contacted directly or this will be resolved on-site within 10 minutes. We apologize for the unacceptable treatment." The call ended. Jim sat back, stunned. He didn't know what flag officer level meant in this context, or what the FAA might do. It sounded dramatic, even improbable. Still, a flicker of hope lit within him. He looked out the terminal window just as the jet bridge began to pull back from Flight 305. The aircraft's engines started to spool. The gate agents were preparing to shut the door. His heart sank. 7 minutes passed, then 8. And just as the final boarding door sealed shut, a sudden stir outside drew everyone's attention. It began with a distant mechanical growl, steady, low, unmistakably powerful. 3 sleek black SUVs surged onto the tarmac, their dark frames reflecting sunlight and authority. They moved with calculated precision, bypassing normal lanes and access restrictions, their discreet government license plates flashing behind tinted windows. They weren't headed to a terminal. They rolled directly toward the parked Alliance aircraft at Gate B7, Jim's flight, and without hesitation formed a tight wall in front of it, physically blocking the plane from taxiing. Inside the terminal, passengers gasped and turned to the windows. Some reached for their phones, others simply stared. Airport ground crew scrambled, clearly caught off guard by the sudden federal presence. Fuel trucks skidded to a halt. A baggage cart veered awkwardly. The plane's pilot, visible through the cockpit window, lifted his headset and looked outside with visible confusion. At Gate B7, Susan and Ben stood frozen. Their faces, once cool with corporate routine, now twisted in disbelief. "What on earth?" Susan muttered, stepping to the glass. The PA system crackled overhead, interrupting another flight's boarding. "Alliance Air, Gate B7. Hold your aircraft. Federal authorities are on site. Await instructions." 2 men in dark suits with earpieces emerged from the lead SUV and briskly entered the terminal. Their movement was purposeful, their posture commanding. One spoke quietly into a wrist mic while scanning the room. Then both locked eyes on Jim and approached with respect. "Colonel Herrigan?" the taller one asked. Jim stood slowly. Special Agent Davies, Department of Defense Protocol Office. Please come with us, sir. We have the situation resolved. Before Jim could respond, another figure appeared at the gate, an older man with tousled hair and a loosened tie, flanked by airline executives and airport security. The staff parted instinctively for him. His expression was thunderous. It was Alistair Finch, president and majority shareholder of Alliance Air. He went directly to Jim, ignoring everyone else. Colonel Herrigan, Finch began, his voice taut with controlled anger, not at Jim, but at the situation. I was just informed by a very persuasive four-star general at the Pentagon that your treatment here today has been nothing short of disgraceful. He glared at Susan and Ben, who both looked like they wished the floor would swallow them. There are no excuses. You had a confirmed seat. You are a Medal of Honor recipient traveling to an official military event, and instead of honoring that, we showed you a system driven by algorithms and apathy. He turned back to Jim, his tone softening. Flight 305 is being held. A first-class seat is waiting. You will be on that flight, sir, even if I have to pull a corporate executive off that plane myself. Jim exhaled slowly. For the first time all morning, he felt seen. Not as a complication, not as a number, but as a man worthy of respect. The terminal had never been quieter. As the two Department of Defense agents stood beside Colonel James Jim Herrigan at Gate B7, the whispers around them turned into stunned silence. Then came the unmistakable sound of polished dress shoes striking tile. Mr. Alistair Finch, president and majority shareholder of Alliance Air, strode onto the scene. His suit was rumpled, his tie slightly crooked, and his face flushed with urgency. The man looked as though he had been pulled from a boardroom mid-crisis, and in a way, he had. Mr. Finch didn't stop to acknowledge his own staff or even the airport director trailing behind him. Instead, he made a beeline for Colonel Herrigan. Colonel, he began, extending his hand and speaking with tightly controlled emotion, I was just made aware, by a rather stern four-star general at the Pentagon, of the appalling treatment you received here today. Let me say this plainly. What happened at this gate is inexcusable. Jim rose slowly from his chair, steadying himself with one hand. His expression remained composed, though the tremor in his fingers gave away the emotional toll of the past hour. Mr. Finch, he said with a quiet dignity, I didn't ask for special treatment. I just needed to be there. For my granddaughter. Finch's jaw tightened as he turned sharply towards Susan and Ben, the two gate agents still frozen by the windows. And yet, instead of a seat you rightfully held, you were handed indifference and a standby ticket, he said, now speaking loud enough for nearby passengers and staff to hear. Susan, I want you to know something. There is a federal protocol underpinned by law and honor that applies to Medal of Honor recipients, and you violated that. Susan's eyes widened. She stammered, Sir, I was following procedure. The system, no system, Finch cut in, should ever override human decency. He turned back to Jim. Colonel Herrigan, Flight 305 is being held. You will be personally escorted to your seat, first class, of course, and I've authorized any necessary adjustments to ensure your comfort. If we need to remove a corporate executive to make space, so be it. Your seat is ready. Jim nodded slowly, deeply moved, but said nothing. The agent stepped in to escort him toward the gate, but Finch wasn't finished. Turning once more to Susan, he said in a tone that sent chills through the air, Miss, you and your supervisor will report to my office by the end of the day. Bring your union rep. As of now, you're reassigned to a non-customer-facing position pending retraining. Ben simply looked at the floor, ashamed. The airport PA system, which had been playing generic flight updates, now echoed with an entirely new authority. Final call. Colonel James Herrigan, please proceed to the gate. Your flight is ready. Passengers parted like the Red Sea as Jim was escorted to the jet bridge. Some placed hands over their hearts. A few quietly saluted. Others simply watched, awed by the unexpected turn of events. One elderly man whispered to his son, That's what respect looks like. Once aboard, Jim found his new seat, a plush first-class window with extra legroom. A flight attendant greeted him with tears in her eyes and whispered, Thank you for your service, Colonel. Another passenger nearby gently offered him a salute. He returned it with a nod. Down on the tarmac, the black SUVs remained in position until the aircraft's door closed. Only then did they roll away in synchronized formation. Flight 305 took off 45 minutes late, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The story would ripple through the aviation community for years to come. The day a Medal of Honor recipient got bumped, and the Pentagon and the airline president put everything on hold to make it right. Jim didn't need headlines. He didn't want recognition. All he wanted was to see his granddaughter graduate, and thanks to honor, action, and accountability, he would. Colonel James Jim Herrigan arrived in Colorado Springs just in time. As he stepped onto the Air Force Academy grounds, the warm spring sun bathed the cadet parade field in light. He stood tall despite his age, his dress blues pressed and his Medal of Honor resting quietly above his heart. The moment he had traveled so far to witness and nearly missed was finally here. His granddaughter Emily stood at attention with her graduating class, a shining example of service and family legacy. When her name was called, Jim stepped forward, his hands trembling not from age, but from pride. With care and reverence, he pinned the gold lieutenant bars on her shoulders, the same rank he had once held when he first wore the uniform. The crowd applauded, unaware of the dramatic events just hours before. To them, it was just a proud grandfather honoring his granddaughter. But to Jim, and to those who knew the story, it was a quiet triumph over a system that had forgotten what real honor looks like. He hadn't sought special treatment. All he had asked for was dignity. And in the end, the nation he once risked everything for responded, not with apologies, but with action. That flight, those black SUVs, and the airline CEO who came to his gate all served as a powerful reminder. True heroes deserve more than policies and algorithms. They deserve unwavering respect. Let Colonel Herrigan's story remind us to never stay silent when honor is ignored. Comment respect if his story moved you. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories that prove dignity still matters, and heroes should never fly standby.